Your new book is called Energize. I'm wondering what the connection is between regrets, managing regret, not having regret, and
Mm,
what it means to have the ability to show up with energy in the life that you live.
mm. Well, first of all, just to give context to what I mean by energy.
Yeah.
So when I talk about energy, I'm referencing it in four dimensions. So it's the physical, it's the mental, it's emotional, and it's the spiritual.
Yeah.
So often when we think about getting more energy, we focus exclusively on the physical, i.e., get more rest, sleep earlier, feed my
Yeah.
body better, move my body.
Exactly.
But
Take
we can
cocaine. No, just kidding.
or
That's
grab
a
a
different podcast. Yeah.
exactly, grab an espresso shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
That's more like my style, actually. Yeah.
but what we tend to do is we neglect the other three domains:
Mm.
the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual.
Yeah.
And for me, the link with the regrets and living in the now taps into the spiritual energy dimension.
Right.
Now, a lot of people that I see and speak to throughout my work tend to have low spiritual energy. Now, what I mean by that is the work that they're doing now versus the work that they actually want to do is vastly different. Now,
Right.
when this occurs, it creates a bit of tension,
Mm.
and that tension can manifest in the form of anger, frustration, and reacting very emotionally to what is going on in our personal life
Right.
because we're not doing the things that make us feel alive.
Mm.
And so that for me is the connection to regret, is that when we begin to address that lack of spiritual energy,
Right.
that is when we begin to live more in flow, that experience of doing things that make us feel alive, that bring us joy, and feel like we're working towards a meaningful life.
Yeah. Just on a definition question, when you say a spiritual energy, can you just because spiritual is one of those big words that has stuff wrapped around the axle with it.
Mm,
Are you talking about? It sounds like you're talking more about a life with purpose and meaning.
mm.
But spiritual often is involving a spiritual belief or a belief in a higher power or whatever it might be. Just so I know, how are you talking about spiritual in this case?
So for me, spiritual in this case is more about meaning and
Yeah.
purpose,
Yeah.
because the reason I think it's such an important piece when thinking about
Mm.
energy is that once we have clarity on what that is, and that will be different for each of us, but once we have clarity on what that is,
Yeah.
it awakens such a potent force within us that we end up showing up in the world in a different way through
Mm.
commitment, focus, and persistence.
Yeah.
And that's why that element of energy is so crucial.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's one thing to decide you need to let go of your past life, just like
Mm,
Brianna West was encouraging in the passage you read out, and to like, I need to get out from underneath the rock and I need to start climbing.
mm,
But how do you help people find a sense of purpose, find a sense of meaning? Because it's one thing to say no to stuff that's not working, but often this idea of actually having a purpose feels quite elusive to lots of people.
mm. You're right, Michael. Purpose can be heavy.
Mm.
Purpose can be very overwhelming when we think about it. And in fact, when I speak to a lot of people, often the reason why they're not taking action,
Yeah.
why they're not making progress forward, is because they're waiting to understand what their purpose is.
Right.
And I think this is where a paradox exists.
I love that.
We need to understand what our purpose is, but yet we don't discover our purpose until we take action.
Right.
And so I think an almost softer way to begin and how I work with my clients is to understand what they're curious about.
Mm.
And that for me is a great starting point. What are you curious about right now? With
Yeah.
no attachment to whether that works out or not, but just to simply explore it. Because looking back at my own life and also from the conversations I've had with others, there is always wisdom in our curiosities.
Right,
We may not always see it at the time, but we can only see that through the passage of time.
right. It's true. It'd be nice if we could just kind of order up our purpose on Uber Eats. You're like, I want a purpose with the works, please. I'd like it all. And if you could just deliver that in the next 17 minutes, that would be great. And I'm willing to tip, and I'm willing to tip big if you can deliver my purpose. But so often it's an exploration, and you start by
Mm.
doing things. Take a moment and hit the subscribe button.